Well, good afternoon. Welcome back. Happy Monday, March 31st, 2025. I'm glad that you all are here. I've been waiting for you. I've been preparing for you, and I hope that there is a word that I can give you today that will encourage you, that will enlighten you, that will inform you, and that will inspire you. So, good afternoon, everyone. And especially to my emerging leaders, my leaders in the making. My name is Tim Allston. I'm a leadership strategist. I am a certified life coach, and I'm honored and privileged to also be a four-time Amazon best-selling author. I'm glad to be with you today, but today, and for this day, once a week, or actually twice a week, I am the host. On every Monday, I am the host of Tim Allston Show. This is the show where we do two things in particular. This is a show where we educate, we empower, and we equip you who are the emerging leaders. And we equip you with God-thought leadership. The second thing that we do that is tied closely to the first thing, my goal is to present current events and newsmakers in the light of best practices from the Bible. What does the Bible have to say? How can the Bible guide us in terms of activities that are happening in current events and with newsmakers? And that happens every Monday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And on Thursday of every week, Thursday, I am pleased to host my second podcast of the week, which is called The 10 Commandments of Leadership. The 10 Commandments of Leadership. It has as its same foci what I've mentioned about the Tim Allston Show, but it also just takes a deeper dive into leadership issues and leadership concerns, once again, for emerging leaders. And as I say, all of us are emerging leaders because the definition of a leader is not one for a position and not one that has a title. What are the criteria for a leader are two main characteristics: influence and relationships. Influence and relationships. Tonight, or this afternoon, whatever the time zone you're in, I want to take a deep dive and to talk about what may become, if we are not careful, become a dangerous turn in what we call American democracy. Last week, President Trump signed Executive Order number 14248. 14248, which is a sweeping voter suppression tactic that is masquerading and that is camouflaged under the robe of what is called election integrity. Election integrity. Now, this executive order directs the Election Assistance Commission to revise the National Mail Voter Registration Form, demanding, get this now, documentary proof of citizenship, such as a passport, in order to register to vote. But even worse than that, is that it threatens to withhold federal funding from states that continue to count mail-in ballots after Election Day, even if those states have on its books, those state laws allow it to do that. Now, the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, has already quickly responded to that through their voting rights director, Sophia Lynn Lakin. She has already called it what it is. Let me share the statement with you. She says, this is a blatant overreach that threatens to disenfranchise tens of millions of eligible voters, especially historically excluded communities such as people of color, such as naturalized citizens, people with disabilities, and the elderly. It is targeted, from what she's saying, at four distinct groups that she defines as historically excluded communities: people of color, naturalized citizens, people with disabilities, and elderly people. This isn't just a political move. It is an effort to attack and to silence your and my voices. And that's wrong. And that is wrong. But now let me just step back a bit and let me share something with you. If you have not had the opportunity, I strongly suggest you get a copy and read or listen to, as an audiobook, this book entitled The Warmth of Other Suns. The Warmth of Other Suns. I've got to get personal about this. The author, Isabel Wilkerson, spoke several years ago here in town at Oakwood University during its Black History Month. And as I sat there, she talked about, she detailed, she chronicled what we call the migration. The Great Migration describes these approximately 6 million Black Americans who left the Jim Crow segregated South from the years of 1915 to 1970. 1915 to 1970, roughly about a 55-year span of time. And as she sat there and talked about the people that moved from the South to points north and points west, I could not fight back the tears. Why? Because she was telling my family's story. My family originated, as far as I can tell from my father's birth certificate, they originated there in Lewisburg, North Carolina, right outside of Raleigh. And they came straight up Route 95 north into the greater Boston area, first settling in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then ultimately in Everett, Massachusetts. I think of others. I remember when I moved to Chicago in 1985, and having no real knowledge of Chicago or the culture, I was just amazed at all of the, not just all of the Black people, but all of the friendly Black people in Chicago. And it's a big, bustling city like Boston. I was not used to people being warm and friendly. And I started asking friends of mine, I said, why are Black folks so friendly in this town? He said, ask them where they're from. 85% of the people, Black folk I met in Chicago, came straight out of Mississippi. That history was chronicled in the Daily Defender since the turn of the century by Robert Sengstack. And then later, I guess when I read John H. Johnson's book, who's the founder of Johnson Publishing, it was chronicled by Lerone Bennett, who was also from, I think, Clarksdale, Mississippi. People came straight up Route 55, 57, into Chicago, into East St. Louis, into Milwaukee, into Gary, Indiana. And this great mass migration. Now, two historical things happened that Isabel Wilkerson chronicled in her book. Number one is the fact that our people, that Black people, freed themselves. There were no laws, there was no legislatures, there was no Malcolm and no Martin to lead them into this freedom. That's number one. And number two is that they exited their oppression, not with fanfare, but with courage. And what they did is they obeyed the still small voice of God within them. That's what triggered this whole movement, this whole mass migration that happened from the South to points north and points west. There's a point in the book that she makes that I think is absolutely critical, which shows the fact that the struggle and the movement of Black people in this country is not unique to them. Right here on the cover of the book, she said, the actions of the people in this book were both universal and distinctly American. Their migration was a response to the economic and social structure that was not of their making. They did what humans have done for centuries when life became untenable. What the Pilgrims did under the tyranny of British rule, what the Irish did when there was nothing to eat, and what the European Jews did during the spread of Nazism. They did what human beings looking for freedom throughout history have often done. They left. So I would encourage you once again to get a copy of the book. Again, the book is entitled The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. Read the book. It's about 600 pages, but it's well written. And also, if you can't get the book or choose not to, get the audiobook version and listen to the book. Listen to the book. It's well worth it. She was an excellent author and an excellent contributor. Now, based upon this history, the question that we may ask ourselves is, well, here we are now in the 21st century. Here we are now facing other efforts to suppress the vote. Where are our 21st century's Malcolms? Where are the Martins? Where are the Medgars? Where are the Mohammeds? Where are the Marcuses? They all seem to have that M as a name. Where are those leaders? The answer is really quite simple. Look in the mirror. The leaders for this next movement in the 21st century will be you, will be me, will be all of us. We are the ones who will lead the movement. We are the ones who, where we are, will make things happen. You know, if you're looking for another Jesse Jackson, if you're looking for another Reverend Al Sharpton, even if you're looking for another Kamala Harris coming riding on a white horse, it's not going to happen. Those days are over. It is that we have the tools. We have internet. We have the ability to talk. We have all the apparatus we need to mount the movements where we are. But now let me be honest with you. Let me be very fair, be very even-handed. Before you and I can complain about the Trump White House, you and I have to clean up our own house. Rather than complain about Trump's house, we need to clean up our own house. What do I mean? What am I talking about? According to the researchers, there were some 90 million registered and eligible voters in the United States who chose to sit out the November 24 presidential election. Many of them said that they didn't see any reason to vote. They had no one to vote for. They didn't see any difference between the parties. Excuse after excuse after excuse. But the reality is there were as many non-voters of eligible registered voters as there were those who voted for the two candidates combined. But what we have to realize is the fact that not voting is not a protest. That's not a protest. Not voting is not a protest. What non-voting is, it is an invitation for the oppression to move into your house and to move into your house rent-free. Let me say that again. Not voting is not protest. What it is an invitation for oppression to move into your house and move into your house rent-free. And there's no need for that. As we often say, when it comes to voting and other things like that, if you don't use it, then you will lose it. And that is the campaign that's being waged against us now. Just like God led our ancestors, our enslaved Hebrew ancestors out of Egypt, he's willing to lead us now. But guess what? He still needs us to do the walking, the marching, and yes, the protesting. He will help us, but we need to help ourselves. I've got a book that I love. It's called The Desire of Ages. It is a Bible commentary on the life of Jesus Christ. And there's a quote in this book that absolutely blows me away, and I'm going to share it with you briefly. It says, to the point I was making, how God needs to help us, we also need to help God too. It says here, divinity needed humanity. Divinity needs humanity, as it requires both the divine and the human to bring about salvation. God's not just going to deliver us. If he just delivered us and just made us free, then he would destroy what is we consider to be our free moral agency to choose, take away our ability to choose. No, we partner with him, we team with him to bring about the freedoms that we want. God works through us, that's the translation. But he works through us even in our flawed and passionate everyday selves. But with that in mind, let me speak directly to you, Mr. Trump. Let me speak directly to you, Mr. Musk, this Trump-Musk co-presidency that we're dealing with. Or I call, on one hand, it's the Trump-exhaustion. On the other hand, it's the masquerade. You with me? Let me say to you right off the bat, looking at this executive order 14248, you will not win. You will not win. Let me say it again, if you don't understand, get the word to you, you will not win. And you're not going to win for three main reasons. You're not going to win because the Bible is on our side. You will not win because history is on our side. And you also won't win because of the cookie jar that we grew up with when we were kids. Let me explain. Let me go back to my Bible. Let me go back to the Bible, to the story in Exodus of the liberation of the 400 years of enslavement of our Hebrew ancestors. They're enslaved in Egypt. The children of Israel had grown so much, as the Bible says in Exodus 1, that they were beginning to just overly populate. And a new Pharaoh came in, as I said, who knew not Joseph. Joseph, who was at Hebrew, who had brought liberation, economic liberation to Egypt, which was the world power. And it said that this new Pharaoh came and knew not Joseph. And so he very calmly said, hey, these Israelites, these people of color, although they were also of color, they are getting too populous. We need to find a way to contain them. And so what his plan was to enslave them, The explosive population was the ultimate liberation for these people. Trump's plan is going to backfire the same way. You are not going to suppress, you're not going to hold back the people of color. You're not going to hold back the naturalized citizens. You're not going to hold back the elderly people. And you're not going to hold back what's that fourth category. You're not going to hold back those who are the people with the disabilities. We will win. You will not win. Also, we can do that's the Bible. That's the Bible, and that's also history. The sociologist Robert K. Merton created the what is called the law of unintended consequences. The law of unintended consequences. And in a nutshell, what he said was government actions often produce opposite results than they intend. Government actions often produce opposite results than they intend. An example, Egypt tried to enslave the children of Israel, and their population grew against their wishes and against their orders. 2020, for example, for us, recorded high numbers of youth and minority voter turnout. And so states tried to flip the script, as Trump is trying to do, and trying to suppress that young and colored vote. It ain't going to work. As we saw recently, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the law of unintended consequences, it caused a surge, an unprecedented groundswell in women's voter registration. Bottom line, suppression breeds resistance. Suppression breeds resistance. But now, let me go back to the cookie jar. You remember that cookie jar when you were growing up, don't you? I certainly do. What I remember, I think all of us kind of do, is when we got to the age when our parents could leave us at home, say maybe when we were about 8, 9, maybe 10 years old, leave us home by ourselves, and they would say such thing to us, and I think all of us heard this line. If we're not home by dinner, the food's in the refrigerator. Get whatever you need to eat, but do not go into the cookie jar in the kitchen cabinet. Do not go into the cookie jar. And so as soon as they left, as soon as we heard the engine rev up in the driveway and see the car drive off, what was the first and only thing on our mind? That cookie jar. Because it was a case that, we may not have been that interested in it before, but once they told us that we couldn't have it, that's what we wanted. Well, voter suppression is our today's cookie jar. Voter suppression is our today's cookie jar. It's basically the rule of when they tell us don't go there, that's really what we want. And that is that cookie jar. I'll tell you the experience that I had, that many of us had here in Huntsville back in the year 2012. It was that presidential election year. And in our community there in Huntsville, we had 3 voting precincts that they compressed into one. Translation, attempted voter suppression. They squoze us, that's my word, my created word, into one precinct. And that precinct happened to have been on the campus of Oakwood University, there at the Oakwood University Church on campus. Okay, I went early to vote. I think I took our daughter there with me, went to vote, and because I wanted her to see the process, and I also wanted her, as she had done in 2008 when she was just 4 years old, and now she was older. I wanted her to slide my ballot into the voting machine. I wanted her to get that feel, that experience. I said it's going to pay off down the road. So I felt. But then I came back because we were not fooled. We, the populace, we, the voting, the eligible voters, were not fooled by that process. Now, the polling place closed at 7 o'clock. But those who were managing the voter registration, voter registrars, they looked outside and they saw the line wrapped around the Oakwood Church, even around the adjoining School of Religion and Theology. And they serviced all of those eligible voters. And from what I understand, because I came back to look at it, and it once again, my eyes welled up in tears. They took the last person in at 9 o'clock and they got to vote. We were not going to be denied. And that's the word I want to send to Trump and to send to Musk. You're messing with the wrong people. We are not giving up our cookie jar. And to see that scene right there at the Oakwood Church, that line, the lines wrapped around the building, it reminded me of that scene in 1995 in South Africa, where people who had never had the chance to vote before were voting for the first time. And I remember vividly scenes of people in long lines. They were wrapped around. They were not going to be denied. And we were doing very much that same thing in North Alabama. Let me just close by saying it's important for us to vote. It's absolutely important. But understand, voting is not some panacea. It's not a cure-all. It is one step in the process. We need to, as we learned back in the 60s, it's important to use that Negro spiritual. It's important to break bread together on our knees. But again, it's also important to make bread together while moving on our feet. The other thing that we had a big challenge on our hands is we need to find the ways and means to encourage our young people to register and vote. And this is a very personal issue with me. I mean, I've got a daughter who's 21 years old. And her mother and I did everything we could to get her involved in the process early on. I mean, when she was 3 years old, she was 3.5 years old, I remember she was learning her Bible verses to say in Sabbath school, that Sabbath morning in church. And so her mother, who was my wife at the time, said, I think it's time for her to learn the I have a dream speech. She was just 3.5 years old, but I'm not going to miss a challenge. And so I asked her, I said, sweetheart, do you want to learn the I have a dream? She said, yes, Daddy. So I said, well, we've got to have a strategy. And what have I always told you? Life is hard. Yes, Daddy, life is hard by the yard, but a cinch by the inch. I said, so therefore we will take Dr. King's speech and break it down, learn one sentence per week, and we'll stack them on top of each other 1 week and another week. And so by the time she was 4 years old, she recited that speech as part of a keynote address that I gave. We then decided we were going to that inauguration. She was 5 years old. She fell asleep out there in that sub-freezing weather. I'll never forget, a photographer came by and clicked the picture of us. That from his newspaper there, I think in Harrisburg or Scranton, Pennsylvania. It ran the local paper. I got a copy of that paper and brought it home and framed it. She later went off to college. Well, many, many years later, like about 13 years later. She even pledged. She went to a school in which many of her classes were in the John Roberts Lewis Hall, named after John Lewis, because this was Pike County and he was probably their most revered citizen. She took classes in this building. She knew who John Lewis was. She even, in her second year, pledged in the same sorority as Kamala Harris. But every time I would ask her, have you registered to vote? No, Daddy. No, Daddy. So I said, you know what? You're 21 years old. Make your own decision. So we've got to find the ways and means to inspire our young people as part of the process. Like I said, voting ain't a panacea, but we learn by doing. I said in the earlier telecast that one of the things we need to do is we need to understand that unfortunately, these young people do not relate to our history. They really don't care about the past. They don't, and in our good intentions, we talk to them in terms of voting, about the people that sacrifice. They don't care about those who sacrificed. They don't care about those who were imprisoned. They don't care about those who were beat. They don't care about those who died. They live for today. So I've come up with a strategy that works for me in terms of dealing with young people. In terms of they don't want to know Black history. They don't want to know anything that happened before them because their life is very, very focused, self-centered, to be honest, on today. I asked them, I said, by the way, I said, do you ever use Wi-Fi? Yeah. Do you use Skype? Yeah, duh. Do you use FaceTime? Yeah. I said, do you know that the person who invented the technology for that is a Black woman who looks like you, Dr. Marion Croak? She's the one who invented the technology for that. She's not somebody dead. She's alive. And to put it in perspective, you all have heard of George Washington Carver, who made over 300 products from the peanut. For all the products he made, he only had 3 U.S. patents. But Dr. Marion Croak, she has some, I think it's some 60, maybe 100 patents from the U.S. government. That's not Black history, that's Black present. And I said, and by the way, I said, so when you drive, do you use a GPS? Well, yeah. Did you know that the person who created the technology for the GPS is a Black woman? I think it's Dr. Gracie West. This is not Black history. This is Black present. We've got to find a way to break through their culture, their world, to teach them so they can understand and so that they can embody this history that we have, that we hold true. I've said a lot of things to you, and I leave you with the Bible text from Philippians 4:8. If there be any virtue in what I've said, and if there be any praise in what I've shared with you, think on these things. So think on justice, think on courage, think on legacy, and think on the millions who marched, yes, migrated, and moved when the odds were stacked against them. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for allowing me to share with you the burden on my heart. We cannot let them beat us on this voter suppression thing. As a matter of fact, that you and I know the more they tell us no, the more we need to say yes. And we vote with our feet. We vote with our pocketbooks. We vote en masse. And let me say another word to my people. When I look at these protest rallies out here, the majority of people I see on these protest rallies are white folk. I understand that many of them have been shocked into believing that the person they voted for has turned on them. And we love to say, we told you so. But it's time now to get beyond that. It's time now for us to say, we're in this battle together. Why? Look at the statistics. Black folk make up 18.2% of the federal workforce. 18.2. And yet we only make up 13.6% of the population of the United States. We are more represented in the federal workforce than we are in the population. So it's time for us to get on those front lines, those battle lines, and fight like we fought in the 50s and 60s to get our rights and not lose them. Again, thank you for listening. I look forward to joining me on Thursday when we talk about the 10 Commandments of Leadership. And I leave you with the words once again from Philip Brooks, who was an 18th century American clergyman and author, when he said, don't ask to have an easier life. Instead, ask to be a better person, a stronger person. He said, don't ask for a task equal to your power. Instead, ask for power equal to your task. And then the work that you do will not be considered a miracle. Instead, you will be the miracle. Thank you. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please tell a friend. And also, whether you're watching on the Facebook page or the YouTube page or LinkedIn page, like, share, subscribe. If you need to contact me directly, and I'd love to hear from you, you can reach out to me by my email, info@timallston.com. And as always, if this information is becoming to you, then you should be coming to us. Thank you. God bless you. And have a happy Easter. And I'll see you on Thursday.